Hello everyone, this is part 10 of What If Naruto Took Hinata for Himself, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. Naruto stood in a long corridor. The lights on the walls flickered and buzzed, their orange glow giving everything a twilight look. Naruto knew this place and had only one thought at the sight of it. OS. He knew where he had to go and ran down the passage until he reached the dark opening. Skidding slightly on the wet floor, he careered into the huge room. A low rumbling chuckle filled the chamber as he entered. It bounced around the glistening walls. Oh dear. The voice was mocking. Sing song. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Poor boy, poor baby, back again so soon. Naruto felt sick as he stared past the mighty steel bars of the demon's prison to where its huge red eyes glittered in the dark. The monster chuckled again, the sound reverberating in Naruto's chest. And he beat you so quickly, so fast, you barely realized what was going on, didn't you? Pathetic. He sneered, I suppose you want help. Naruto swallowed the bile in his tea and forced his face into a hard smile. If you want to live. Huh. Well, that's a doozy, ain't it? Even if you don't deserve it, my very existence rides on you. Oh well, here you go. The snaking tendrils flew towards Naruto, bubbling violently. They slammed into him, carrying him up and away back to the living world. Naruto was just in time to catch the kunai as it whistled towards him. As he grabbed Hiyashi's wrist, he felt sparks of power run from his heart to his ribs. They knitted the cracked ones back together. The one that had punctured his lung was forcibly removed, sparing him no discomfort, and reset by the invisible creeping fingers. He looked up at Hiyashi and saw with a sudden malicious satisfaction that the man looked scared. Naruto smiled and Hiyashi's mouth fell open. The fangs protruding from his mouth scarred his tongue as he laughed. Hiyashi tried to tug free of Naruto's grip but to no avail. Finally Naruto grew bored and threw him back like a rag doll. He hit a tree which split in half under the force of the blow. A scream. Naruto turned. Sakura and Neji stood at the end of the path, and the campfire had spread and now ringed them, making them a pair of dancing silhouettes to a pair of human eyes. But a pair of fox eyes could see them clearly. Naruto ignored them. He had no interest in them right now. Instead he turned back to his opponent just as Hiyashi kicked him. Naruto fell back with a howl of rage but flipped straight back onto his feet with an amazing flexibility that he would never have had if he had been in his normal form. He launched himself at Hiyashi, no subtlety, but it was so quick that he hit him squarely and knocked him down. Pinned to the floor, Hiyashi had to defend himself with his arms as Naruto clawed at him, spitting wildly. His long talons made 3 parallel gashes across Hiyashi's en and they bled profusely. Naruto stopped and sniffed the air. That scent was interesting. He shook his head. No, that was disgusting, animalistic. He scrambled away from Hiyashi, pinching his nose. It took the Hyuga a moment to realize he was free. Pressing his hand to his en, he stood up. Naruto was crouched against a tree, growling and spitting like an animal. Hiyashi chuckled. Little monster. Hinata leapt from the tree where she had been fighting and stared between the two of them. Hiyashi moved forward and Naruto shrank back, covering his nose. Father, stop, don't hurt him. Both their heads snapped around to look at him. Hiyashi's gaze flicked fearfully between her and the creature crouched on the floor as Naruto's gaze was firmly glued to Hinata. For him all else was suddenly blotted out as long as she was present. The smell of blood was gone and was instead replaced by something almost overpoweringly attractive. Lilacs. Naruto rose to his full height and walked towards her. As he stepped into the now roaring light and she saw his eyes, she stumbled back, terrified. He stopped, seeing his head to one side. This beautiful creature feared him. Why? Slowly, to show her she was safe, he extended a hand. She jerked back as the man opposite him lurched forward with a cry of fear. Naruto paused. Why were they afraid? He was sure he should know, but he didn't. He didn't even know who they were. He knew only that the beautiful thing across from him must be his, and if she wasn't, she needed to be. Curling his hand, he caressed her cheek. She stared at him. Naruto's fingers trailed across her lips and onto the other side of her face. But in a moment of miscalculation where he moved his hand as she turned her face, one of his long talons cut her across the apple of her cheek. She gasped and her hand flew to the wound. It was shallow but spanned about an inch and was bleeding. Hot, salty blood seeped between her fingers. Naruto's hands went to his skull. Good. It smelled good and Naruto knew it was wrong. He jumped back as his instincts told him what to do. Hunt her. Those creeping fingers stroked his mind. Hunt her, like a little bird, she's yours. Naruto howled and fell to his knees. He had to attack. Leaping up, he launched himself at the beautiful thing, but something slammed into his side. He went off course and wheeled about. It was the other one, the one with the strange eyes whose blood smelled so similar to the small female. Naruto felt a chuckle rise in him, but it came out a dry growl. Hiashi watched the tender way the monster stroked his daughter's face. No, that thing wasn't capable of affection. Then one claw sd her skin and she began to bleed. The thing fell back seeming to be in pain. And half a second later he had flung himself at Hinata with a howl that sent shivers up Hiashi's spine. Without thinking he threw himself at the fox boy. Naruto flew away from them dazed. Then a growl trickled out of him, sounding like a slight cough. It took Hiashi a second to realize it was a laugh, so it still had some semblance of awareness. But why laughter? He saw why a second later. Blood-red chakra was flowing from Naruto. It enveloped the boy looking like fire. As he watched, long bands of it wound up from the base of Naruto's spine. Tails. The boy's eyes were no longer conscious. They were holes of animal bloodlust. Naruto raised a hand and a second later a point of bright sky blue was swirling in the fire. Hiashi closed his eyes. This technique wasn't worthy of this trash, but he had to use it. Taking a deep breath, he began to focus all the chakra he had into the palm of one hand. When he opened his eyes, he saw the same sky blue of the Rasengan focused around his own arm. It swirled up his arm, binding his weapon to him. Soul Sword. A long blue blade extended from his hand. It was the same length as his forearm and tapered into a sharp point. It had been a long time since he had used Soul Sword, so he decided to test it. Sweeping it a wide arc behind him, it made barely a whisper. At first he wasn't sure it had worked, but then the tree closest to him fell. A long diagonal cut in the wood made the top of the tree slid smoothly off the base and crashed to the forest floor. Hiashi smiled, sharp as ever. The blade shivered in anticipation. A loud growl rent the air. The boy was ready. Rasengan spun in his hands as he launched himself forwards, galloping full tilt towards Hiashi, who drew back his arm and thrust the blade forward. Hinata screamed. Soul Sword's bright blade plunged into Naruto's chest. Hiashi was triumphant. Or so he thought. Naruto hadn't stopped running. He didn't appear to have noticed the presence of the sword stuck through his torso. Hiashi only had a second to understand this and another second to comprehend what it meant before Rasengan was slammed with all its force into his chest, directly over his heart. Hiashi's mouth opened in shock and blood plumed from it. Soul Sword didn't dissipate immediately, as Hiashi was attached to it, but instead as its wielder flew a good 30 feet, lifted Naruto and dragged him halfway before the blade finally flew out of his chest. Naruto slid another quarter of the distance on his face and lay still. Naruto stared into the almost dark of the forest path. The strange pink color that everything was tinted was due to the fire some distance behind him. The edges of the world wavered and shivered into darkness. Then he could feel vibrations. Everything seemed extraordinarily alive outside him, and everything was moving except for him. He was just a dark blot in the world. With those rumblings his heart beat. The blackness stole a little closer. Then something cold grabbed his shoulder and he was staring up into a familiar face. Sakura, he whispered, then with more strength. Sakura. I'm here, she whispered, cradling his head in her lap. Don't worry, you're going to be fine. I'm fine. He winced as the blackness crept another millimeter and his remaining vision began to swirl. She tore open his already sped shirt. Oh, she gasped. There was no wound. There was only a thin red line over the place where Hiashi had espered him. Sakura moved her hand over him. The mark was scalding hot. I told you I was fine. He huffed, sitting up a fraction. The darkness receded a little. You should see the other guy. Then his face whitened as his own joke hit home. OS. He gasped, trying to rise, but his knee buckled. Sakura tried to support him, but he shook her off. Hiashi, go see Hiashi. I think I cared him, Sakura. Sakura turned as pale as him. Jumping up, she ran to where Hyashi's crumpled form lay. Rolling him over, she listened to his heart. It was fluttering wildly like a tiny bird. She quickly folded her hands his chest and concentrated her best healing jutsu on him. The damage was centered on his heart, but she couldn't fix the rest of the damage. Rasengan had shaken him to the core, some of his bones had fractures and his painful landing meant his back was flayed raw. Even if she could heal all that properly, she wouldn't be capable after this. Naruto found somewhere the energy to roll over onto his back. There was a thin sliver of sky visible and he concentrated on the stars to keep him conscious. As long as he could see that tiny point of light, he would be okay. Towards the fire he heard a tiny cough. He had forgotten her. He didn't know how, but he had. Because he could do nothing else, he raised a hand towards her and called. Hinata. There was a second of silence. Then footsteps and she appeared above him. Hinata, he whispered. The darkness crept back into his peripheral vision. He could see nothing but her. I'm sorry, he breathed. She stared down at him. A second passed. What are you? Naruto's stomach clenched. I'm so sorry. A tear slipped from the corner of his eye and cut a path down the dirt and blood on his cheek. He lifted a hand and covered his face. I should have told you. Why didn't you? She asked, still looking down at him. I thought you would hate me. He said desperately, more tears sliding across his cheeks. I thought you would think I was a monster, just like him. He jerked his head in Hyashi's direction. She didn't follow the nod. She was staring down at him as he lay on the floor, shoulders shaking with unrepressed sobs. I am a monster, he gasped. I never deserved you. He was right. Naruto covered his face and cried desperately. He didn't hear her get down on her knees. She slid her hands over his and moved him away. He saw her beautiful face just inches from his and thought perhaps he had SD. Then she kissed his tear-stained face, his cheeks, his eyes, his nose, his brow and his lips, and he knew he was alive because his heart exploded into life. She lifted his head and cradled him against her. Idiot, she whispered and left it at that. Naruto knew he was forgiven and loved and finally let the blackness slid over him. Sakura fell back. Hyashi's heartbeat was strong now. She, on the other hand. Sweat trickled from her pale forehead and she could feel her own heartbeat running hard in her chest. Lying back on the floor, she gazed up at the leafy canopy and the 1 or 2 stars that winked through. She was about to slip into what she thought was a well-deserved sleep, but suddenly heard a scream of terror. She sat up to see Hinata crouched over Naruto, shaking him. Sakura, she screamed, he isn't breathing. Sakura thought that her heart might have stopped beating for a second. She had nothing left. If he was going now, really going, she couldn't save him. They would never all be together again. With all the energy she could summon, she leapt up and lurched towards him. I can't hear his heart, shrieked his Hinata, pressing an ear to his chest. Move, Hinata, cried Sakura, cupping her hands over his heart. She focused her remaining chakra and made it into a rough flat shape. Taking a deep breath, she slammed it against Naruto's exposed chest. He lurched, then fell limp like a doll. Hinata screamed, her voice cracking. Sakura managed 3 more compressions before she fell back exhausted. Hinata looked at her desperately, not understanding the extent of her friend's fatigue. I'm sorry, Hinata, she whispered, burning tears in her eyes and nose. Hinata's mouth opened in a soundless scream. He was gone. Gone. She pulled him tight against her chest and rocked him back and forth, hot salty tears spilling forward, running down her face into his hair as she pressed his forehead to her open mouth. Her next scream wasn't silent. It split the night and set off a cacophony of screeches and howls as the creatures of the night awoke and recognized the sound. Agony. She took a deep breath that sounded as a high-pitched wail. She screamed again. Even longer this time. Breath, scream, breath, scream, breath, scream. Neji was kneeling by his uncle. He jumped when the first scream came. He saw his cousin clutching Naruto's limp form to her. So did Hyashi. The older man sat up and looked to the noise. He had expected some form of satisfaction at the sight of his opponent's, but instead of seeing him, all Hyashi saw was the girl hunched over him. His little girl's face was twisted in sheer anguish. She pressed the boy so tightly to her he thought that the body might break. He tried to rise but felt his shaken body protest and fell back. The sound of his child's agonized howls cut him like a knife. How long had she been allowed before he slipped away? Even the strongest that had been espered with soul sword lasted only a minute or two. Had she been able to say goodbye? Scream. Breath. Scream. Breath. Scream. No, maybe not. The medical ninja child lay beside them, her breathing shallow. She must have done all she could. Actually, Hiashi thought, surprised, she must have saved him too. Why? Her friend was closer, in a more critical condition, but the defiant girl had chosen him instead. Hiashi could think of several explanations, but for some reason one stood out. You told her to, he whispered, looking at Naruto. Leave me and care for him. Neji looked down at him, surprised. Maybe it wouldn't have made a difference. Hiashi thought. It couldn't have. Soul Sword was called Soul Sword for a reason. If espered, it cut of all chakra flow, LD that most vital part of you clean through and rendered it useless. He was S from the moment Hiashi touched him with that thing. But still, beside her S friend lay Sakura. Tears blurred her vision and made all the colors of the forest blend together. She couldn't do it. He was gone. She could feel his broken heart, unbeating, as the last parts of his chakra swirled emptily around the broken recess of his soul. Chakra. She could feel it. There was still chakra. There was still the barest sliver of a chance. She sat up, ignoring the protests from her screaming muscles. Gently she put her hand on Hinata's shoulder. She jerked away. Hinata. Her voice was a thin croak. Hinata looked up at her. Sakura gestured at Naruto. I think I might be able to save. Blind hope cutting a swath across her features. Hinata was already pushing him onto her. Sakura folded her hands over his heart once more. She knew of one thing she could use. One hope. Life transfer technique. Her hands lit pale green as her last chakra reserves, her very life forces flowed into the empty shell of her friend. They joined the last wisps of life ghosting around inside him. She gasped as she felt her last pull of energy all too soon run dry and her heart stutter dangerously. She wheezed and her eyes rolled. She began to fall, but a pair of strong arms caught her and pulled her back. Hinata. She clasped her hands over Sakura's and held them there. Sakura began to panic. Did Hinata know that she would K her if she held her there? Surely, but then she realized what Hinata was doing. The dark-haired girl clasped her hands over Sakura's and threw everything that she was into them. Hinata was giving Naruto her life. Her heart was strong, but not as strong as some. Sakura had enough energy to keep going, but watched in horror as the technique quickly drained the life from her friend. Still it poured and poured into Naruto with no response. Hinata shuddered. Sakura had to cut the link soon. She wondered as she looked at the shaking girl if it was too late, if the energy would continue to flow from her and into him even if she did stop. She gasped suddenly as she realized how low Hinata was. She was as shaky and pale as Sakura now, but her brow still creased in concentration. Then her life ran completely dry. The pale glow that had run from her stuttered once, twice and went black. Hinata let out a shuddering gasp and slumped forward across Naruto's body. Then the connection cut by itself because one of the links was gone completely. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.